Ever wondered why the West Indies was the powerhouse of T20 cricket? Whenever we talk about the IPL or of any franchise leagues all around the world, it is impossible to look past a lot of the West Indian stars who've been great contributors over the years to different teams and franchises. These are stars who ply their trade with immense talent, and more than just the talent itself, there's a Caribbean flair to them. They are entertainers of the game, and all of us enjoy watching these people play. And it is no secret that the West Indies has always been a hub for talented cricketers, right from the Viv Richards and Clive Lloyds of yesteryear to the newer stars like Kieron Pollard, Chris Gayle, Dwayne Bravo, and so many of the others. And the stories of West Indies cricket is a rather interesting one. Now, all of us know that the West Indians dominated world cricket in the 1970s and 80s, and from there, of course, there was a decline, but it led to a new resurgence in T20 stars come the late 2000s and the 2010s. While there are a lot of factors for why West Indies declined and eventually led to the new era where West Indies T20 stars were born, there was one very big reason, almost a dent in world cricket if you ask other cricketing nations, but something that when you look back at from a West Indian point of view is something that saved their cricket. It was a scam in the proportion of millions. However, there was a silver lining. Now, before we get into the story of what saved West Indian cricket, definitely hit that subscribe button to see more videos like this. Now, to understand what has happened in West Indies cricket, it's important that we establish some context, especially around the late 1990s and from there leading to the turn of the century in the 2000s. Now, even despite the decline of the West Indians in the late 1980s, up till 1990 and through the 1990s, the West Indies still had a pretty good cricket team. You had the likes of Curtly Ambrose and Courtney Walsh being some of the best fast bowlers that the West Indies has ever produced playing through the 1990s. Not only that, you also had some iconic names in the likes of Brian Lara and eventually later on Ram Naresh Sarwan and also Shiv Narayan Chandapal. So by no means was this a weak West Indian team, especially when it came to Test cricket. However, the decline was slow and steady. Especially around the 2000-2001 season is when the retirements of Courtney Walsh as well as Curtly Ambrose took place. And post this, the West Indies were definitely on a decline in the Test format because all they had was these three good batters, and apart from that, the rest of the side was pretty inexperienced and they were struggling to either have the motivation or to put in the performances at the highest level. In fact, it had gotten so bad that from 2004 to 2010, the West Indies played 65 Test matches, and out of these 65 Test matches, they only won 5 of them. And it had reached a point where the concern for West Indian cricket was just beyond the West Indies. All of world cricket was watching the West Indies collapse, and it was not something that as a pure cricket fan you would like to see, especially because of how they'd been dominating in the early era of cricket. From there to the great downfall, it had a lot of people in world cricket concerned. And you can call it a coincidence or not, but with the retirement of a lot of the greats, 1999 was actually the last year during that period around the early 2000s where the West Indies Cricket Board actually had a revenue surplus. To be exact, that figure in 1999 stood at $2.8 million. But with the turn of the century, there was also a turn in the fortunes for the West Indies and the West Indies Cricket Board. For the next 3 financial years, they suffered losses in every single year. They suffered a total loss of $16 million, and by the financial year end in September 2002, these people had a net loss of $13.2 million. Not only this, even the conditions between the players and the board was no good. The West Indies Cricket Boards as well as the West Indian Players Associations were generally always at conflict, always trying to arrive at a certain price where they could have contracts for their players and where they could have a certain match fees for each of these players. Of course, these terms were never met and there was constant turmoil during that period in the islands, especially when it came to the kind of cricket and cricket at the highest level. But do you have a conflict between your Wi-Fi and the devices that you use?
Hey guys, welcome back to yet another IPL review. If you're tuning in for
Bro, it's lagging again. We literally can't go live without buffering these days.
Bro, I swear, even last week when we did our post-week review, we got stuck again and people get commenting that Aswin, you're stuck.
Folks, tell us honestly, is your Wi-Fi smart enough for your smart home?
Because ours wasn't until we moved to Fibernet Smart Wi-Fi.
This isn't your usual Wi-Fi. It's AI powered. It learns on its own how your home uses the internet and keeps upgrading accordingly.
Like when we go live on our post-week reviews and someone else at home is binge watching reels, the Wi-Fi knows exactly where to send more speed. No more jugaad needed.
Plus those annoying dead zones at home. Gaya bhai, any room, any device, any app, all of it is completely sorted.
And it even tries to fix small issues before you notice. Matlab no lag, no buffering, just clean live sessions.
Smart homes deserve smart Wi-Fi.
Powered by Act AI.
Is your Wi-Fi smart enough? If not, remember that everybody else is already streaming smarter. It's time to switch. Not only that, because of the financial fractures, there was also a suffering of grassroots cricket levels. Things had gotten so bad for the West Indies, especially the West Indies Cricket Board, that they had decided to put all of their eggs in a single basket, and that was the 2007 ODI World Cup. Now, through the years of 2004, 5 and 6, the West Indies did everything they could to prepare towards that 2007 World Cup, and all of the funds that they put or even earned were going towards the preparation of the stadiums for that World Cup. And this is where a Texan businessman stepped into the picture in 2005. A man by the name of Alan Stanford stepped into the picture. He proposed a T20 series, a tournament, something similar to the IPL, and this is around the time when the T20 format was still very, very new in world cricket. His idea was very simple. It was something supposed to be very similar to something like a baseball tournament, where there would be a league and all of the teams would be pitted against each other, and it would be a local tournament based out of the islands of the Caribbean. But this was not all. The biggest reason why this idea was even afloat and even considered by the West Indies Cricket Board was the money behind this. This man, Alan Stanford, was ready to offer 28 million US dollars to set up this tournament. And this was dream money. This is something that the West Indies Cricket Board had not seen in almost a decade of all of their revenues combined. And because of this simple reason and the simple philosophy with which this man came, they were ready to take him on board, and they were ready to give rise to a tournament which was known as the Stanford 2020. The inaugural season of the Stanford 2020 took place in 2006, and 19 teams featured in this tournament. This was a big deal because usually in any kind of tournaments that the West Indies would conduct locally, not these many teams would ever feature. It would usually be the main cricketing centers like Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and so many of these other known places. But in this tournament, there were also a lot of the other islands that were considered that had fringe teams and not a lot of players, but they were still made a part of this tournament. And even just beyond the tournament itself, this man was ready to put in money into each team's development. In fact, 280,000 US dollars was poured into the development and professionalism and coaching of every single team. And the results were there to be seen. A lot of these players who were coming up through the ranks had never experienced anything like this. The level of professionalism and coaching, as was covered in so many articles during that era, was something that was unseen in the last decade of West Indian cricket. Now keep in mind that this was a T20 tournament that was of this scale for the very first time, possibly in world cricket. The IPL or even the ICL for that matter had yet to occur. And because of this, anticipation and a lot of joy had filled the streets of the Caribbean. In the accounts of a lot of cricketers like Darren Sammy looking back to that era, they talk about how this was such a good time for West Indies cricket because they could see an influx in the amount of cricket being played, even just locally, even amongst just the kids in the place. And even apart from just the current cricketers of that time, there was also a lot of support from former cricketers and of course a big name of Viv Richards as well. In fact, Viv Richards also inaugurated the tournament itself by facing up against Alan Stanford in a baseball style pitch at the start of the tournament before the first game. Now this was a very funky tournament. It was conducted in Stanford's own stadium, which had a very small capacity of just 4,000 people, but there was still a lot of excitement around this tournament. This was a fascinating time for West Indies as well as world cricket that were witnessing this format of T20. Something that was very peculiar, but something when you look back at was very nice, was that they made use of a bright orange ball through the course of this tournament. While the matches of course were competitive, it was clearly seen that there was a big gap in talent when it came to some of the fringe teams versus the teams of the regular cricketing centers. In this league, there was a decent display of talent, and a lot of the youngsters at that time, the likes of Karen Pollard, Samuel Badri, Darren Sammy, all of these players first made a huge impact and first got into mainstream limelight through this tournament. In fact, it was in one of the matches here that Karen Pollard scored his first ever T20 50, a blistering 83 of 38 balls. And what was bigger was that this came in the semi-final that eventually led his side into the final of the tournament. The final took place between Darren Ganga's Trinidad and Tobago and Ram Naresh Sarwan's Guyana. And it was a very competitive game, in fact going down to the final over where Guyana needed 14 runs to win, with Ram Naresh Sarwan not even being on strike. And the commentary panel at this time was Mark Nicholas and Tony Cozier. And you can imagine the atmosphere around this game, especially with the commentary and the hype in place, and also the kind of stage that was set for that final over. From there, despite Ram Naresh Sarwan not being on strike, they eventually got to the target, with Narsingh Devanarayan closing out the game with a 6 for the Guyana team. And because of the fact that the prize money was $1 million for the winner of this tournament, this shot was at that time termed as the $1 million shot that got them the victory. Clearly, the Stanford 2020 had proved to be a massive success, not just in the West Indies, but even attracting eyeballs from a lot of places in world cricket. In fact, it had done so well that there was an expected audience globally of 300 million who were going to tune into the 2008 season of this tournament. The T20 World Cup had occurred in 2007, and so T20 cricket was definitely something that was gaining steam throughout about world cricket. There is no denying the impact of the Stanford 2020 on the West Indies cricket and especially the resurgence in T20 cricket for the West Indian team. It is no secret that in 2012 and 2016 the West Indies team did go on to win the T20 World Cups, and Darren Sammy in an interview with BBC Radio did give credit, in fact a lot of credit, to this tournament. He talked about how a lot of the talent from that time not only got recognized but also got pushed and nurtured in the right direction because of a fact that they got a platform to express this potential that they had. Now, while this is all of the good that the tournament had done, it also seemed really good to be true. Just consider the fact that you're a cricket board who's absolutely struggling, not making profits, and then a businessman comes in and is ready to pour that much amount of money into a tournament without any guarantee of returns. And even when the proposal for the Stanford 2020 was floated out, a lot of prominent ex-cricketers like Michael Holding, Clive Lloyd, as well as Ian Bishop were completely against this idea. It also did not help that the businessman Alan Stanford remarked that Test cricket was boring and that T20 was the future. This of course was enough to throw off a lot of the purists in world cricket at the time, because of course Test cricket is the pinnacle of cricket. And this is where we come to the year 2008, where Alan Stanford's ambitions went to the next level. Instead of looking at just West Indies, he was now starting to think about world cricket as a whole, and clearly he wanted to do something of a very large magnitude. This is where he proposed the Stanford Super Series, a tournament that would have a $20 million prize money for the winner of this tournament itself. And he did not go local with this tournament. This was not something that was in the West Indies itself. He went to various cricket boards all around the world. He went to the ICC as well, but of course the ICC did not budge and did not give in to his offer. However, in all of this, for some reason or the other, the England Cricket Board was ready to play and be a part of this tournament. And so the Stanford Super Series took place in 2008 with possibly the most weird combination of four teams that you'll ever see in a tournament. It had England, it had the West Indies, who were then called the Stanford Superstars for obvious reasons. It had the winners of the Stanford 2020, and it had Middlesex, who had won the T20 tournament back home in England. And the final match was to take place at Lord's, where Alan Stanford flew in with a helicopter right into the stadium, got off, and had a suitcase with the supposed $20 million that he carried straight to the ECB chairman who was there to receive him. All of this show business seemed very different from something that we're used to seeing, especially in the cricketing world, especially at that point in time. Remember, it's just 2008. The IPL has only had one season at this point, and extravaganza was not something that cricket really embodied. Now, the West Indian players were definitely raring to go. They had been practicing for a period of 1.5 months with the best facilities, with the best coaches, with the greatest fitness regimes in that era. This is something that they've also spoken about at length in a lot of the interviews that happened. For England, Kevin Peterson was to captain that side and take on the West Indies or the Stanford Superstars in the final of that Stanford Super Series. But it turned out to be an absolute embarrassment for England, who clearly were greedy about the money at that point, not just the board but also the cricketers, as the England team was bowled out for just 99 and the Stanford Superstars team that chased down this total of 99 in just 12.4 overs with 10 wickets to spare. Chris Gayle remained 65 not out with a great hand from Andre Fletcher as well, and the Stanford Superstars chased this total down to win a prize money of $20 million. Now, while England losing was a dampener in itself, there was also a lot of other controversies that took place around this match. Eventually, world cricket was starting to realize that there was something really fishy with this man, Alan Stanford, and it just did not sit right with a lot of prominent cricketers as well as ex-cricketers around the world as to what he was doing and what he was trying to accomplish in world cricket. And as to the suspicions of many people, they were proven right, as the SEC in US charged this man with fraud and money laundering. He was sentenced to an improbable 110 years of prison because of the fact that he was a part of a $7 billion Ponzi scheme. In fact, the Stanford 2020 and the tournaments that he was conducting was just being used as a means for money laundering. Now, while this man went to jail, it impacted the West Indies in a way that goes just beyond cricket. A lot of people's livelihoods and business was because of the fact that the Stanford 2020 used to occur. And because of the arrest of this man and this huge scandal racket that he'd been running, a lot of people overnight had become unemployed. A lot of their businesses had gotten shut, and West Indies cricket was once again in a very precarious position. This was a great lesson for world cricket as to why you don't take outsiders into the game and why money cannot simply be made overnight. The circumstance of a West Indies cricket board and the greed of an English cricket board, among so many of the other things that happened, clearly showed that cricket needs to be played in the world and be promoted in a manner that can be slow, steady, but leads to a lot of growth. Because of the fact that the West Indies was in a position where they could not get funds considerably is what eventually led not only to their downfall initially but also to this kind of scandal taking place. Now, while there is a silver lining that it revived West Indies cricket to some extent, and that effect is seen not just in T20 cricket but also in Test cricket through the late 2010s, it is safe to say that something like that cannot be tolerated in the world of cricket. And this is where it's so important in world cricket for us to have a conversation around how we help nations that are associate nations and other people who are trying to get into the cricketing world. For example, England is now going to be hosting Zimbabwe for a test match, and things like that are what will eventually promote cricket. The fact that the ECB is paying a touring fee to the Zimbabwe cricketers to come and play this test match shows that this is a step in the right direction and something that a lot of boards can learn from. At the end of it all, we are people who are cricket fans and would like to see the game prosper, not just in the nations that it is currently, but also across the world. This has been a video on the multi-million-dollar scam that eventually led to West Indies winning the two T20 World Cups. Thank you so much for watching. All of our links are in the description below. But most importantly, if you want to learn more about the Act Smart Wi-Fi, go down to the link in our description and find out more. Leave your comments down below if you have any recollection of these tournaments, and definitely share this video with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.